Daniel Carter, after careful review of the evidence and the jury's verdict, this court sentences you to a long-term period of incarceration.
No, Your Honor, this isn't fair. I didn't mean for this to happen. That's not what happened.
Mr. Carter, you've had your opportunity to speak. The court's decision stands.
Murmuring voices.
Daniel Carter was born during a winter power outage in a crowded public hospital, where even the emergency lights flickered like they were unsure whether to stay on or give up. And his first cry echoed through a hallway filled not with celebration but with stress, because his father was outside arguing over the phone, begging his supervisor for extra shifts so they wouldn't fall behind on rent again. From the very beginning, Daniel entered a world built on instability. Unpaid bills stacked on a small kitchen counter, cracked apartment walls stained from old leaks, and a refrigerator that hummed loudly despite often being nearly empty. His mother struggled with chronic illness that drained both her energy and their savings, and as the years passed, Daniel grew used to watching her cough through cold nights while his father's frustration slowly turned into silence. By the age of 7, Daniel had already learned how to read tension in a room, how to stay quiet when arguments started, and how to distract his little sister so she wouldn't feel the weight of things she was too young to understand. He wasn't a troubled child at school, just distant, often tired, wearing shoes that had clearly been worn by someone else before him. Teachers described him as unfocused. Classmates called him poor. No one asked what it felt like to go home unsure if dinner existed. The winter he turned 9 was the coldest anyone could remember. One night the heater stopped working entirely and frost formed inside the windows. His mother lay weak in bed, his father hadn't returned from work, and the kitchen cabinet stood bare. That was the night his little sister tugged his sleeve and whispered, "Daniel, I'm hungry." Those words didn't just make him sad, they made him feel powerless. At 9 years old, he felt responsible. So he walked 3 blocks through freezing air to a small grocery store glowing under harsh white lights. He didn't plan a crime. He planned to solve a problem. He stared at a loaf of bread longer than he had ever stared at anything before, then slipped it under his jacket and ran. He didn't make it far. He was grabbed, shouted at. And within minutes, he was being processed like someone far older and far more dangerous. No one asked why. No one asked about the empty apartment. Juvenile detention changed him more than hunger ever could. Inside those walls, weakness attracted attention. Fear was exploited. Older boys tested him immediately, and Daniel learned fast that tears made things worse. A 17-year-old named Marcus noticed how quickly he adapted and told him something that would echo in his mind for years. Nobody saves kids like us. By the time Daniel was released months later, he no longer looked like a child who had stolen bread. He looked like someone who had learned to survive. He returned home quieter, watching more than speaking. Poverty hadn't disappeared. Bills hadn't stopped. And now, something inside him had hardened. As he grew older, survival slowly replaced innocence. He dropped out of school at 16 to help his family, but small legal jobs never covered medical expenses. So he turned to what he now understood: quick money, small thefts, opportunities others missed. At first it was wallets, then unlocked cars, then empty houses. Every time he repeated the same sentence in his head, "I'm not hurting anyone." For years, that sentence protected his conscience, until the night it didn't. The night that destroyed Daniel's life didn't begin with rage or revenge. It began like every other risk he had taken before. A house rumored to be empty, a quick entry, a quick exit, no confrontation, no violence, just survival, like always. But survival depends on certainty, and that night certainty failed. Headlights suddenly flashed across the living room wall. A car door slammed outside. Someone had come home early. Panic moves faster than logic, and in seconds, The atmosphere shifted from controlled to chaotic. Voices rose. Fear flooded his chest. A sudden movement was misread. Instinct replaced thought. And in one irreversible moment, a line was crossed that Daniel had promised himself he would never cross. The silence afterward felt unreal, heavy, suffocating. He stood frozen, realizing that whatever he believed about control, about survival without damage, had collapsed. The version of himself he had protected in his own mind no longer existed. Within weeks, he was arrested. The media simplified everything. Repeat offender. Escalating pattern. Danger to society. Headlines reduced 25 complicated years into a single label. In court, prosecutors presented timelines, records, prior offenses, building a narrative that made the outcome seem inevitable. But no one described the empty refrigerator. No one described the detention cell that replaced childhood with caution. No one described the 9-year-old boy who thought stealing bread was the only solution. As the trial progressed, Daniel sat mostly silent. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he had learned long ago that explanations rarely change outcomes. When the verdict was delivered, the courtroom felt smaller than it had before. And when the judge finally said, "Daniel Carter, after reviewing the jury's decision, this court sentences you to long-term imprisonment," something inside him cracked. That's not what happened. "I didn't mean for this," he said, his voice breaking. Not to deny responsibility, but to deny the simplicity of the story being told about him. But procedure does not pause for complexity. The gavel struck. The decision stood. Officers guided him away. As he walked out of the courtroom, he didn't look violent. He didn't look monstrous. He looked exhausted, like someone who had been slowly cornered by circumstance, mistake by mistake, until one terrible second sealed a future that may have begun the night he first learned that survival sometimes costs more than innocence. And the question that lingered long after the courtroom emptied was not whether Daniel had committed a crime that had already been decided, but whether his story began with evil or with hunger.